You know, we spend so much time trying to read the tea leaves of the economy. We obsess over the Federal Reserve's meeting minutes. We look at obscure shipping
All
indices.
these massive abstract levers.
Exactly. We talk about consumer sentiment surveys and it makes us feel like we have a handle on things. But sometimes I think we overcomplicate it. Sometimes the most disruptive force in business isn't interest rates or geopolitics, it's just the weather.
It is the one variable you absolutely cannot negotiate with. You can haggle with a supplier. You can't haggle with a blizzard.
And that is exactly where we're starting today.
Wait, wait.
We're doing a deep dive into a report that just dropped today, Monday, February 2nd, 2026. It's the GWT2Energy U.S. Restaurant Climate Impact Report.
Right.
Now, I can almost hear some of you thinking, a restaurant report? I don't own a bistro. Why do I care?
Which is a totally fair reaction. I mean, on the surface, it looks pretty niche.
Uh-huh.
But here's the hook. The restaurant industry is kind of the canary in the coal mine for the whole American economy.
How so?
Well, think about it. Restaurants operate on razor-thin margins. They rely on just-in-time supply chains, for perishable goods. They rely on foot traffic, actual people leaving their homes.
In the buildings themselves?
Crucially, they rely on physical infrastructure, HVAC, plumbing, electricity, all functioning perfectly. So if a restaurant is struggling because of the environment, it means the country's infrastructure is struggling.
So if we look at what restaurant operators are panicking about this morning, we're basically getting a sneak peek at what the entire United States is about to face.
Precisely. This report is written for facility managers terrified their pipes are going to burst. But for us, it is a crystal ball for the next 4 weeks. And looking at this data for February 2026, honestly, it looks like an obstacle course.
And that's our mission for this deep dive. We're going to unpack exactly what February has in store. We're talking a massive cold snap, the return of the polar vortex, and a map that looks like a logistical nightmare for, 80% of the country?
It's going to be a bumpy ride. And the central theme here isn't just that it's cold. It's about variance.
Let's start right there. The report spends a lot of time defining what it calls extreme temperatures. Now, usually when we see extreme weather, we think about heat waves.
Climate change, grid failures from everyone running their AC.
Right. But for February 2026, the report says heat is basically off the table. Highs above 95 degrees. Unlikely.
Right. The ceiling isn't the problem this month. It's the floor just dropping out. The report defines extreme using 2 specific metrics.
Okay.
The first one's simple enough. Lows dropping below 40 degrees Fahrenheit.
Which for half the country is just called Tuesday.
Sure. For you and me, maybe. But the second metric is the one that actually matters for infrastructure. They are flagging any temperature that deviates by 15 degrees Fahrenheit or more from the seasonal average.
Okay, let's unpack that. Why that specific number 15 degrees? If the average is 30 and it drops to 15, I just put on a heavier coat. Why does a building care so much about that swing?
Well, that's the difference between biology and engineering. Humans are adaptable. Buildings, not so much. Most commercial HVAC systems are designed based on something called a design day.
A design day?
Yeah, engineers look at historical data and say, okay, the average worst-case scenario is X, and they build the system to handle that.
So they build it for the average bad day, not the catastrophic one.
Exactly. When you get a deviation of 15 degrees below that average, you are pushing that equipment completely outside its design envelope. You're redlining the engine.
So it's not just that the heater works harder, it's that it literally might not be able to do the job.
The report calls it HVAC strain. When the variance hits that 15-degree mark, the system can't cycle properly. It just runs continuously, 24/7, trying to chase a temperature it can never reach.
And efficiency plummets.
Efficiency plummets, utility bills spike, and this is the big one. Components start to fail. Compressors seize up.
Yeah.
Heating elements burn out.
And if you're running a restaurant and your dining room is sitting at 55 degrees on a Friday night,
You're closed. It doesn't matter how good your food is. Nobody is paying to eat dinner in a meat locker. So when we look at this report, we're not just looking at weather. We're looking at a map of potential business failures.
let's pull up that map because visually the report paints a very, very clear picture.
It's a giant blue blob.
A widespread freeze covering the East, the Midwest, the North. Let's go region by region. Let's start with the Northeast, New York, Boston. Places that know how to handle winter.
They do. The forecast there is for lows in the teens to the 20s. Now, a Bostonian isn't going to panic at 20 degrees.
Barely buttons their coat.
Right. But again, look at the deviation. That is 10 to 15 degrees below the average.
So even though the people are tough, their infrastructure is still taking a hit.
It's right on that threshold of significant strain. But then you move to the Midwest, Chicago, Minneapolis, and the numbers stop being annoying and start getting dangerous.
The Midwest looks brutal on this map.
It's the epicenter. The report forecasts lows dropping below 0 degrees Fahrenheit. That is a massive 15 to 20 degree deviation below average. When you get into sub-zero temps, that far off the norm, you're not just worried about customer comfort.
You're worried about pipes bursting.
You're worried about pipes bursting inside the walls because the insulation wasn't rated for negative 10 degrees. It's a whole different ballgame.
And the report highlights the Northern Plains Fargo, North Dakota, as the real extreme outlier here.
Yeah, Fargo is looking at temperatures 20 to 30 degrees below normal.
That is mind-boggling. 30 degrees colder than normal in a place that is already one of the coldest spots in the country.
At that level of deviation, standard operating procedures just go out the window. You are effectively in survival mode. You're not trying to make a profit. You're just trying to keep the building from falling apart.
But honestly, reading through this, the part that really stood out to me wasn't Fargo. We expect Fargo to be tough. It is the section on the south.
The surprise factor.
Exactly. Florida and the Southeast. The report explicitly highlights Miami and Tampa. Now, the forecast is for lows in the 30s and 40s. To our listeners in Chicago, that sounds like a vacation. Why is this a red alert?
Because context is everything. For South Florida, lows in the 30s are, they're statistically rare. That's 10 to 15 degrees below their average. The report notes recent records have already been broken there.
But it's more than that, right? It's the infrastructure.
It's the infrastructure. A restaurant in Tampa is just built differently from one in Chicago.
How so?
In Chicago, you have a vestibule, that little airlock room when you walk in. You've got double or triple pane glass, a massive furnace. In Miami, you have single pane glass. Your HVAC system is a heat pump designed to cool the air, not heat it against near freezing temps.
So the building itself is fighting a losing battle.
And then there's the business model. The hospitality industry in the South relies so heavily on the alfresco economy. Outdoor dining is a year-round revenue stream. If it hits 38 degrees in Miami, that patio is dead.
You lose 50% of your seating capacity overnight.
Just like that. And the customers inside are shivering because the heat pump is locked up in defrost mode. So while the North is battling to keep pipes from freezing, the South is battling a massive revenue collapse.
It really illustrates how resilience is completely geography dependent. Is anywhere escaping this? Is there any warm spot on the map at all?
There is one outlier, the Southwest. Phoenix, Arizona seems to be living in a different reality this month.
They were in the orange on the map, right?
Yeah, a rare above-average spike. They're looking at temperatures 5 to 10 degrees above normal. No extreme heat, mind you. But while the rest of the country is shivering, the Southwest is actually warmer than usual.
Wow, a real haves and have-nots situation.
It really is. It highlights how the jet stream creates these pockets of winners and losers. But for the vast majority of the country, the arrow is pointing way, way down.
I want to dig a little deeper into the operational side of this. We talked about heaters failing, but the report mentions a specific driver for this weather, the polar vortex influence, and it assigns a 60 to 70% likelihood of persistent cold.
Which, for a monthly forecast, is a very high confidence interval. Meteorologists are usually much more hedged than that.
So we know the cold is coming. What are the hidden costs beyond just calling the HVAC repair guy?
Well, first think about the grid. The report mentions potential power outages, especially when recovering from prior storms. If you have a grid that's already stressed, and then you slam it with this, every single building is cranking emergency heat strips. The load is immense.
And for a business, an outage during a cold snap is a total nightmare.
You can't cook, you can't see, and you risk losing your inventory. If the power goes out, the walk-in cooler eventually warms up or, ironically, freezes over. It's a mess. But there's another layer the report dives into: consumer psychology.
The hibernation effect.
Exactly. The report draws a direct line between the thermometer and the cash register. It says when lows drop below 40 degrees, foot traffic drops significantly. And remember that stat.
Lows below 40 in 80% of the U.S. this month.
80%. That is a staggering number. 4 out of 5 potential customers are in the shiver zone.
And human nature takes over. Unless you absolutely have to go out, you stay in.
You eat what's in the pantry, you order delivery,
Hmm.
maybe, but even that gets tricky.
Because of the roads.
Precisely. The report flags ice and snow risks from the Ohio Valley to the Mid-Atlantic. That doesn't just keep customers home, it cripples the supply chain.
So you're a restaurant owner. You have no customers coming in. And even if you did, the truck with your produce is stuck in a ditch outside Cincinnati.
It is a triple threat. No customers, no supplies, and a broken heater. It's basically an operational siege.
Okay, so usually when we talk severe weather, we have to talk about hurricanes, but the report clears that board pretty quickly.
Yes, thankfully. Likelihood is 0%. We're outside the Atlantic season.
Good. One less thing to worry about.
One last thing.
However, tornadoes are a different story.
They are. People tend to think of tornadoes as a spring thing, but February isn't safe. The statistical baseline is about 40 tornadoes nationwide for the month.
That feels higher than I would have guessed for winter.
It is surprisingly active, and the report identifies a danger zone moving from the Gulf Coast northward. They specifically flag cities like Mobile, Alabama, Jackson, Mississippi, and Atlanta.
Atlanta really cannot catch a break in this forecast. The freeze and a tornado risk.
It's a volatile mix. You
Yeah.
got that deep freeze punching down from the north, and it collides with warm, moist air coming off the Gulf of Mexico. That collision is what creates the instability.
What's the probability looking like?
The report puts the likelihood of significant severe weather at 20 to 30%.
That feels low compared to the 70% confidence on the cold.
It is, and they note that confidence on specific locations is low. Tornadoes are just notoriously hard to predict weeks out. But for a business owner, that uncertainty is almost worse. You don't know if a tornado is coming.
It forces you to have a safety plan ready that you hope you never, ever use.
Exactly. They mention a risk of isolated severe thunderstorms in the southeast, specifically mid-month. So if you're in that region, you need to be watching the radar, not just the thermometer.
Let's map this out chronologically. The report gives us a timeline, week 1, 2, and 3. So week 1 is from tomorrow, February 3rd through the 9th. What's the headline?
Week 1 is the shock. This is the onset of the deep freeze, the cold locks in east of the Rockies. We're looking at light snow potential from the Ohio Valley to the Mid-Atlantic.
And that's where we see that 80% of the U.S. below 40 degrees.
Correct. In the Northeast and Midwest, there's a 50 to 60% likelihood of being 15 degrees below average immediately, so there's no easing into it. The freezer door just slams shut.
Okay, then we move to week 2, February 10th to the 16th. And this is where the plot thickens. The report mentions a wobble.
Yes, the wobble. The models show the polar vortex is expected to weaken slightly, so we might see some moderating temperatures in the middle of that period.
Which sounds like good news. People start thinking, okay, the worst is over.
And that is the trap, because the report warns of a recoil. A secondary cold surge is possible right around February 14th.
Valentine's Day.
The timing could not be worse.
Let's just pause on that. In the restaurant world, Valentine's Day it's the Super Bowl of dining out.
It is massive. For many places, it's the highest revenue day of the entire first quarter. Restaurants are fully booked. They've ordered premium inventory lobster, expensive wines. They have extra staff scheduled. The financial exposure is huge.
And then, perfectly timed to ruin everything, another cold surge hits.
It's a disaster scenario.
Right.
If the roads ice up or it's just too cold to go out, you see mass cancellations. It's what we call a washout. The revenue just evaporates, but you've already paid for the food and the labor.
That inventory just goes to waste.
It does. You can't just refreeze fresh lobster. It is a very specific, high-stakes vulnerability in the calendar.
It really shows how Mother Nature has a way of finding the most expensive point in the calendar to cause trouble.
She is definitely not sentimental about your dinner plans.
So we survive Valentine's Day. Then we hit week 3, taking us through the 23rd. Does it get any better?
It's a mixed bag. Below average temperatures are expected to stick around in the east, but you have a potential for early thaw risks in the south by late February.
Early thaw risks sounds ominous. A thaw is usually a good thing.
A slow thaw is good. A rapid warm-up, which is what they're hinting at, brings its own problems. Ground shifts, pipe bursts, flooding.
So you trade the freeze for a flood.
Potentially. And meanwhile, the upper Midwest is still in the freezer, still likely 15 degrees below average. So that divide between north and south starts to widen again.
So if we put this all together, February 2026 is shaping up to be a month of just operational defense.
That is the perfect term for it, operational defense.
In the north, you're battling the physics of the polar vortex, just trying to keep the heat on and the water liquid. In the south, you're defending against weather your buildings were never designed to handle, plus that tornado wildcard.
And for everyone, you're at the mercy of a fragile supply chain. The trucks have to drive through the storm to get to you.
It really brings it home for me. Whether you're listening and you own a restaurant, or you just plan on eating in one, or heck, just living in a house. This data shows how fragile our daily systems are.
It really does. We build our lives, our businesses, our infrastructure on the average.
Yeah.
But when the temperature deviates just 15 degrees from that norm, the friction in the whole system just skyrockets.
It's a great reminder that we are still very much living in the physical world. You can have all the AI and digital tech you want, but if the heater can't keep up with a 20-degree drop, the system fails.
And that's why these reports are so valuable. It's not just about knowing if you need an umbrella. It's about anticipating that friction and preparing for it.
Which leads me to a final thought for you to chew on. This report, it talks a lot about energy solutions and preparedness. And obviously we have the technology to predict these things. They are calling this polar vortex with 60 to 70% confidence.
Very high confidence.
Right. So here's the question. If we can predict a polar vortex with such high confidence weeks in advance, why does it still feel like a surprise to our infrastructure every single time it happens? Why do we act like it's an unprecedented disaster?
That is the million-dollar question. Is it a failure of prediction, or is it a failure of imagination? We have the numbers, but we seem to lack the will to build for anything other than that perfect average day.
Something to think about while you turn up the thermostat this week. Stay warm out there, everyone.
Stay safe.
We'll catch you in the next deep dive.